Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Paranormal Heart Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Folks, my special guests for episode 103 are dear friends and hosts of ParaTruth Radio, Erik Scerbak and Justin Cancilliere. Erik and Justin have been hosting ParaTruth Radio for 9 years now, and they've decided to bring the show to an end. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but they felt it was time to retire the show and move on to other endeavors. In this episode, Erik and Justin talk about how they started their show, some of their favorite topics and moments over the years, and they share what projects they currently have in the works. This is not the last we'll hear of Justin and Erik. They're not that easy to get rid of. Before we get to the show, here's a listener-submitted true encounter sent by Rory Reese. My encounter took place in Pennsylvania around 2006 in my wife's childhood home. We met and got engaged while I was doing a year-long internship at the small scale of organic farm on her college campus. After the internship was over, she still had a few months left of college, so we were looking for a temporary place for me to live until she graduated. My future mother-in-law offered for me to stay in my then-fiancé's old room until we could get a place. I took her up on it and got a job at a nearby convenience store working second shift. My wife had told me that she had an encounter in this room when she was 13, where she awoke to see an old man in overalls standing alongside her bed, looking down at her. She screamed, and he vanished as her sister, who shared the room, woke up and ran over to check on her. Since that time, she had felt uneasy in the house, like she was being watched. I had stayed over a few nights here and there at the house with her prior to moving in and never got any weird vibes. So I had hoped the spirits moved on, but the very first night I stayed there alone, I realized that it hadn't. My wife dropped me and my things off and headed back to her dorm. After unpacking a bit, I prepared to call it a night. The room was situated with a bed on either side, with a door that led into the living room. The bed I was staying in was arranged so that the head of it was near the door, rather than the wall of the room. I assume they did this to give each other privacy. I closed the door, turned out the lights, and got into bed. As soon as my head hit the pillow and my eyes drifted shut, I felt the mattress depress on each side of my head, just outside the edge of my pillow. It was so forceful that my head sprung up when the pressure released. I shot up and spun around, expecting to see my mother-in-law standing there. She's a bit of a prankster. But there was no one there, and the door was still closed. I jumped out of bed and hit the lights. Still nothing there. That night, I slept with the TV on, and it seemed to do the trick. So I continued to do so every night I slept there alone. It seemed to do the trick, but didn't prevent other weirdness. When I started my new job, I realized that my shift had me arriving back home about 10:30 p.m., an hour before my mother-in-law returned from hers. My mother-in-law is awesome, but she was incredibly frugal when it came to electricity, and didn't leave a single light on in the apartment on leaving, which meant returning to a pitch-black house, aside from a little bit of street lamp light. Not much of that light made it in either because we were on the second floor. The first night returning home to this pitch-black, empty apartment, I opened the door from the tiny front porch and stared in the abyss. The front door led into the kitchen, and I remembered that, unfortunately, the switch to turn on the kitchen lights was on the inside of the living room wall, so you had to traverse the dark kitchen to access it. I took a step into the apartment and immediately heard what sounded like tiny lasers firing. I jumped back out onto the porch and strained my ears to try and decipher what it could be. I realized that I couldn't just stand on the porch for another hour until my mother-in-law got home, so I mustered up the courage to make another run for the living room. This time, halfway through, I heard a distinct but slightly muffled, "To infinity and beyond." I hauled ass back out the porch. I wondered what could have made that noise when it hit me. In my bedroom, there was a bin of toys from my wife's sister's daughter, and in that bin was a Buzz Lightyear action figure. I had stayed in that room many nights at this point, and it never did that. So not only was the spirit toying with me, but it was doing so from my bedroom. I decided that it hadn't done anything to physically harm me, though, so I had to get over it and make another go for the living room. This time, there were no more noises, and I got to the light switch without incident. These were the two most substantial incidents with the ghost, but this apartment had access to its own attic space, which my mother-in-law used for storage. It seemed like every other week that something needed moved or from it. I would help her out with these tasks, and every time upon leaving the attic, there was the undeniable feeling of eyes on the back of my head. No matter how craftily I tried to throw a quick glance back, I never saw a figure that was responsible for this feeling of being watched. The following summer, my wife graduated, and a couple of months afterwards, we moved into our own new place. I kind of felt bad leaving my mother-in-law to deal with that entity by herself, but she claimed to never have issues with it. Although she felt it was there, visiting from time to time went without incident, unless it involved retrieving something from the attic. Thank you so much, Rory, for submitting that amazing encounter. Folks, I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed narrating. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like me to narrate your paranormal encounter, just drop me an email at paranormalheart13@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell your friends. Don't keep it to yourself. Tell the world about Paranormal Heart Podcast. You can tell them that new episodes are released on the second and last Sunday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find me on YouTube, Podbean, KPNL Digital Network on Thursday nights, and any place you find Fine Podcast. Now, on with the show. Hello, Justin and Erik. Welcome back to Paranormal Heart.
Thanks for having us, Kat.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Yeah, you guys are always welcome. You guys have always helped me right from the beginning, so now that it's the ending for you guys, I thought it was only fitting to have you guys on.
Yeah, well, for sure.
So before we jump into everything, why don't you give the listeners, in case they haven't heard of you guys before, which I'm pretty sure they have, just tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you guys are doing.
Go ahead, Erik.
So I've pretty much been involved within the paranormal and the supernatural for nearly as long as I can remember. I grew up with, The X-Files. My family and I would always sit down and watch it. So very young, I was kind of introduced to the whole paranormal realm. My house is haunted growing up, the house I'm currently living in, and continued to be haunted up until about a year ago or so, when I finally did a cleansing, and it seems to have moved on, but I don't know. Sometimes there's just things that happen in life that's like, is it still clinging and I just can't feel it anymore or what?
It's waiting to pounce.
It seems like that sometimes. But so I've always really been interested in the paranormal, especially the ghostly side of stuff. Started digging into the occult and learning about that kind of stuff. And eventually started bringing up all these conversations with Justin and I. And it kind of led into this podcast, which a very old podcast of ours called Night Stalkers. It just kind of something we were doing for fun. And as time progressed, it became more and more of an extension of ourselves and our discussions that we'd have on a daily basis. And so, that led up to ParaTruth Radio, which we've had now for 9 years now, right?
9 years, yeah.
Yeah. So, which is crazy because, that's 9 years on top of all the other stuff we've done in podcasting since 2008. But yeah, so we've been doing that. And of course, ParaTruth is all about talking about the paranormal, same stuff that you talk about. But we've covered everything from the occult to ghosts and angels, to cryptids, you name it. We've talked about it. And it's been a great time.
Justin?
Yeah. Well, same thing for me. I was interested in the paranormal from a very young age. Had a Ouija board as a kid, had tarot cards as a kid, and don't know if we had a haunting in the house that I was growing up in, but we always had, I guess, positive results with the Ouija board. We never had anything that really stuck out as like bad or anything until the last time that I had used it, and I used it by myself. And so that's usually not a good thing either to do. So I ended up giving up the Ouija board. And then I had started tarot in my teens, and that kind of has led through to today. And I mean, we've had so many iterations of shows in the paranormal. You know, we started with Night Stalkers, and then Erik and I split apart, and I had Parasite Radio. He had Forgotten Truth Radio. And then we came back together with ParaTruth Radio. And then I also had Beyond Reason for a while by myself. And that kind of just went away as well, just because ParaTruth was kind of going towards what we ended up doing now, which is what I was doing on Beyond Reason. So, it's been a hell of a ride from 2018 to 2023. So 15 years doing paranormal podcasting. Maybe a break here and there, but not very lengthy of a break. So...
Yeah, you guys have had an amazing go, amazing topics. Loved your guests. I think I knew you guys before the Hatman episode that I listened to, but that's the first time that I had heard anybody else talk about the Hatman was on your show. Because as the listeners know and you guys know, I grew up with the Hatman in the apartment building that I lived in as a child, and never spoke to anybody about it before. And when I heard your guys' show. And somebody spoke about that, I thought, oh my God, somebody else has actually seen that. So I thought that was just amazing. And then reached out to you, Justin. And it's just been chatted for, I don't know how many years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys helped me out an awful lot with my show in the beginning and continue to do so. I pick your brains every once in a while, so thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I really,
we'll
really
always
appreciate
be here
it.
For all that stuff, so...
Yeah, there's a few people that we're still in the, I think Jim Mallard called it the duck circle. No, what was it that he had a Facebook group with a few of us on there, and we don't chat all the time, but we're still there for each other if we need it. So it's I'm so thankful that we have the circle of friends that we do have.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
So tell us how you got into the podcasting part. What made you decide to do it? How did it all start for you?
Well, it was basically, like Erik said, we would talk about it a lot. And then it would usually be around a campfire, usually with drinking, sometimes a cigar. And he and I were watching Ghost Hunters a lot together and Supernatural. And, we started talking about all these different things that we would see on both shows. So just randomly one day I said, I wonder if there's a online radio that we could do a show on. And, lo and behold, there was podcasting, which... It started in 2006. I had never really heard about it until I started researching it. And we started on Blog Talk Radio.
In 2008. So that's 2 years after podcasting really started, which means we had no clue what we were doing when we began. And there was no one to guide us.
Who says you do now?
So many sound issues,
right.
So many connectivity issues.
It was horrible. But it was fun. Back then it wasn't really scripted. We had papers in front of us. Back then, we didn't have all the info on the computer for us. We would just print it off, use books, stuff like that, write it down on notes, and use that as our main source. So a lot of it, as it is in with ParaTruth Radio, there's a large amount that's opinionated just based on our own beliefs and what we come to learn over the years. But then that's then interspliced with the facts that whatever you want to call it, paranormal scientists or various investigators kind of bring out based on their own studies and investigations. So it's always been kind of fun. But way back then, it was like all new to us. Like everything we came across, like, what is this? What's that?
Yeah.
And so it was cool. But when you go for, 15 odd years or so within this kind of field, it's just, you start to realize, man, we've covered so many things, and it's just like thinking back to when we started to where we're at now. Our knowledge has expanded tremendously, but I think with ParaTruth, it's just become much more, I would say, more organized, but also more professional. But we weren't like just goofing off like we were on Blog Talk Radio and having a blast and getting drunk or whatever. We're like, okay, we need to clean up our act and do this the right way. So I think that's the biggest change between then and now. But it was always fun.
The way you talked about having the pieces of paper in front of you because you couldn't research on the computer like you can do now, it's almost the equivalency of when you went to the library back when I was younger and used microfiche.
Watch, Kat, you're dating yourself there.
I know. I'm older than dirt. So how did you guys get around trying to make it, because you've been doing it for so many years, how do you make it fresh and not boring for your side?
I think that's kind of where we're at, and that's why we're kind of putting an end to it. I shouldn't say end. We might be coming back here and there with an episode every once in a while or something, but after doing it for as long as we have and doing it kind of off and on with a guest, we've been kind of more so with us by ourselves over guests this year. Last year it was the opposite. But I think asking the same questions over and over again starts to get dull. Maybe not for listeners, but for the person doing the interviewing. Something that's told to me at work daily is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result, which is the exact same definition as insanity.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I feel I'm going insane with the show. It's just one of those things where it's I'm not going insane with one of those with the show, but it's one of those things where you start to lose interest. And Erik knows, he and I have discussed multiple times where I'm just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, it's been, and for a time I had been taking a break where we did like only 3 or 4 episodes a quarter, if that. We were doing one like once a month or every 2 weeks or something like that. So
yeah. And it's seasonal for us. Like, I mean, it's summer now, and so it's kind of this downtime with the paranormal aspect of everything. And of course, we're getting into September, which is leading into Halloween. And for us, that's when we tend to find the most information. We're most hyped up to be talking about the paranormal. But for us, I mean, after 15 years, you're doing it for an entire year. Justin will send me a link or a cryptid or whatever. And he'll be like, did we talk about this one? I'm like, yeah, we did. And I'll be like, hey, Justin, did we do this? Yeah, we did. Back on episode, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, all we keep doing is repeating the same information, the same characters, if you will. And it's just, it's one of those things where it's like, thankfully, we've done over 300 episodes. So people who are new to the paranormal, who are still trying to learn, there's a big backlot of info on our website and everything for them, or on, anywhere you can find podcasts. But for us, being 300 so on many episodes in, it's like, man, and that's on top of the other, 10 years or so that we've been doing this. So it's, there comes a time where it's just got to hang your hat, Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a favorite topic that you guys have covered? Justin, we'll start with you.
I think by far my favorite episode we ever did was the one with Ben Radford about chupacabras. His book on chupacabras was so interesting. And then to just talk to him about he actually felt, the chupacabra wasn't a thing. He feels that, it was something that was either hallucinated or possibly a thought form that, took form after somebody got scared from a movie.
Erik?
For me, I would say it's I've always been a fan of the werewolf, the Dogman, those characters. So anytime we get a chance to talk about that, if you listen to the show long enough, I bring up the werewolf almost every episode. Somehow I tie it in. So that's definitely one of my favorite subject matters. When it comes to shows themselves, there's so many. Like, I think two though. Like for me, there's two. One is our original episode or show that we did on the Salem witch trials, which I think we called Salem, the Birth of American Communism. It's also our highest rated and most watched episode of all 300 some odd episodes. That's still our highest grossing one, next to, I think it was a Goatman episode that we did, which was really fun. But one of my other favorite episodes was one that I actually wasn't a part of because I was in Los Angeles and I couldn't get in for the recording. And that was for a book called Unholy Communion. We had the author David Rufino on, who Justin was able to talk to. And I listened to that one. And that one was just a lot of fun. And that was really our first introduction to whether or not extraterrestrials may possibly be some sort of spiritual entities, maybe even demonic by nature. So that was really our first introduction many years ago. And it kind of took off because if you listen to the show on any of our extraterrestrial stuff or demonology, they always cross paths. And that's just not with us, but with anyone we talk to who are experts in aliens and extraterrestrial beings. They'll always bring up, well, they might be spiritual entities that we're just not fully aware of or we're being deceived about. And it's just fascinating.
I just lost my train of thought, and this is why I don't do live. Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Like I said, I'm so friggin' tired. You could probably tell by looking at me. So I hope I don't nod off. I'm just kidding.
Well, and that's why we're quitting the show. We're boring people at this point.
So the first time I heard about your show was when I first met Jim Mallard and John Mallard, not related. And they were talking about your guys' show, ParaTruth Radio, and I thought it was such an interesting concept. Christianity point of view of the paranormal. Did you get a lot of flack when you first started off with your show with other Christians saying, what are you doing talking about the paranormal?
Oh, yeah. And especially, within that personal or particular group of Christians, because it's so, Christianity is a weird thing. There's so many denominations within the faith, and there's various beliefs within those denominations. But there's a particular group, I don't really know what to call them. I was actually, weird thing, this was literally a shower thought that I had about 4 days ago. And I was like thinking about, I don't know why it came up, but I was thinking about like some of the moments that I had throughout my history with those particular Christians who were just so quick to stab me in the back when answering questions. Because we were in a group that had a lot of quote unquote Christians, and they would ask questions. And one of the questions they asked was, can a symbol or does a symbol have power in and of itself? And I must have been the only one to come forward and say, no, I don't believe that. Like, I don't think a symbol can be powerful without some sort of intention behind it. And they immediately started telling me that I wasn't a true Christian. I'm going to hell. Shame on me for even suggesting that. And I started to, I was thinking about this in the shower for whatever reason of what I would call these types of Christians. And I start thinking that maybe they're really Enochian Christians, because these are people who've read the book of Enoch and like worship this book. Everything that they believe is based off that one single book and nothing else that's scripturally based, which just drives me crazy. And so I tend to find a lot of trouble with the Enochian Christians because they're just very, what's the word, like prideful of their own personal beliefs. And if anyone believes anything that's different to them, then that person isn't a true believer, and they're going to suffer in hell one day and be punished by God. And it's a horrible thing. It's not the way it should be. It's not the way the faith is. But unfortunately, we get some bad eggs that, a lot of people, they hear those bad eggs louder than the ones that are good. So definitely had a lot of interesting interactions with those type of people.
From the other side, though, too, because when we first started, we didn't know what we were doing as far as where we wanted the show to go. And so we went from kind of more of a debate. So we switched to kind of more of the Christian side. And that was partially due to the fact that we were making more friends with the Christian paranormal podcasters back then. And then it kind of swayed the other way again. And then I'd say within the past few years, Erik and I have both kind of been on the same page, more or less, even though he still does have his Christian faith and background. But we both kind of come to an understanding that neither of us really know what the hell is going on. We just have to discuss it the best we can.
Yeah. I think with anything, you can't just read something in the course of an hour and have full understanding. You can gain some knowledge, but that's it. So with the years and years of study and research, beliefs change, ideas change, and a lot of my stances, a lot of places where I would stand in Christianity regarding some of these paranormal topics has changed, because I started realizing that there is significant truth in some of these stories that we're reading, or some of these scientific studies that have been published, and not everything is understandable. As a Christian, I can't understand everything in the spiritual realm. And it's true that with Christianity, a lot of things are just black and white. God is good, devil's bad, so on and so forth. But there are other things happening within our world, within our universe, within other belief systems throughout the world, where there are people who, for example, may worship Buddha, and they have a similar reaction or feeling or whatever that someone who worships Christ does. And that's not to say that one is right and one is wrong. I don't know. But I know where I stand. I know what I believe. And that doesn't discredit somebody else's beliefs. But, it's like, I step back. I'm like, well, there must be something there. What it is, I don't know. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But to stand here and be like, I'm a know-it-all because I'm part of a faith that is literally the largest believing faith in the world, the largest religion in the world. That's just, it's arrogant,
I remember when I
think it was being part of those groups that actually made you see that a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, because I know years ago I would message Justin and say, hey, I have maybe a guest who's a psychic or whatever. Are you interested in having them? And Justin's like, I don't know. I'll have to ask Erik what he thinks. And I know there was a time that you didn't even want to touch that topic, and now you're a little more open. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a lot more open. I'll be honest with when back when we were doing Night Stalkers, when I first became saved in 2009, there was a huge flip in my belief system. And so we would have mediums on and psychics and whatnot. And I couldn't help myself. I would just start bashing and start like pushing and trying to dig and all the stuff that they didn't appreciate at all. And there's just a lot of bad blood. And it actually took Justin and I splitting and me getting my own show in Forgotten Truth Radio to really learn not only about other belief systems, but also my own and where I stand in Christ. And so with that particular show, when I first started, I had my main audience were people who were part of ParaX Radio Network. And so they were Wiccans, they were Satanists, things like that. So it was always like, hey, we don't want to listen to this because I'm only talking about stuff that's Christian based, that's biblically based, stuff like that. And within the course of 6 months, those same people who were hating on me early on became some of my best friends. I mean, quote unquote best friends. They weren't best friends, but there were people that I was really good friends with. We got along, we had an understanding. And in the end, when somebody new was listening to the show and they were typing in the chat saying, oh, he's, full of it, This one guy, I don't know his name, but he had threatened me that he was going to do black magic and put a curse on me.
Oh.
And I had Wiccans and, other people of other faiths jumping in on them, like, no, like, defending me.
Yeah.
And when I finally had to call it quits and leave Forgotten Truth, like those same people who were, we'll call them enemies in the beginning, were now my friends. They didn't want me to leave. They wanted me to stay. They loved that I shared my faith in a way that was relatable to them. And that I would take the time to listen to them. So, when Justin and I came back to ParaTruth, I had a kind of a different outlook. And we started bringing on these guests that had different views on the world and the universe. And the conversations were a lot better because of it.
I have a topic that I don't understand. People who know me know the flat earthers I don't understand. And that's a topic I haven't actually had on the show yet. I would like to have a flat earther on the show, but I'm trying to find the right person because I don't want to get heated. I want to be able to understand their point of view. And right. I find, I've listened to other podcasts where they totally don't believe that the earth is flat. They have people who do believe, and it's just oil and water. And then the podcast just, instead of an hour, it's like 25 minutes because the host just like, I had enough. And I don't want to do that. So I would like to be able to find the right person to be able to discuss that. So if that person's out there, I'd like to hear your point of view. But so are there any topics that you guys have absolutely thought, no, I'm definitely not going to do this, and you haven't?
Well,
because I think you guys are pretty much.
Earth theory was that one that we weren't going to do, but we had. I had a friend of mine who kept pushing for us to do it, so we did, and I don't buy into the flat earth theory. There are some very interesting theories and some interesting facts that they bring up. But one of the things that drove me nuts about that specific topic was my friend wanted to say, NASA's pulling the wool over our eyes. The shot from the International Space Station or shuttles or whatever, it's an fisheye lens and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, the flat earth theory was proved way before NASA, or unproven, way before NASA even became a thing. So just to say that the patriarchy is deceiving us, we're just going to come up with a whole new thing. But that was probably the one that drove me nuts more than anything. We, as a whole, tried to stay away from conspiracy theories as much as humanly possible. Not that it can't be true, but it's one of those things where, me specifically, I won't speak for Erik on this, I don't want people to hear these theories and then just keep going down that rabbit hole to the point that they're like afraid to go outside because of A, B, C, D. So,
right. And I totally agree. And it's one thing that I'll say is common here with this whole thing is that the people who believe in flat earth and people who believe in a round earth, and why these discussions get so debated, is because they're not really truly arguing between a flat earth and a round earth. They're fighting or arguing between science versus religion, because in the religious context, at least in terms of the Christian scriptures and plenty of other scriptures out there too, it makes it kind of creates a story where it seems like the earth is flat. The way that the authors describe the earth from their very little understanding there, but also, science comes out and says otherwise. And you got to realize, like, science in terms of space, everyone wants to say NASA, but NASA is a very small company among so many out there. Because, now we have SpaceX, which is a big one. We have Astra, there's Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, X-Core Aerospace. Like, these are all people that are not just American. They're from various different countries. So if indeed NASA, quote unquote, is trying to pull the wool over our heads, then every other space company and space exploration company has to be in league. And I'm sure there's people out there that will argue that, but to what extent and why is beyond me. Like, it would be a conspiracy that I think would be very hard to cover up in the long, range of it, especially when it's very clear that when you look out into space, like just look at our sun or our moon, it's very clear that they're three-dimensional spheres in our sky. Especially the moon is the easiest to see once it's shadowed and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, there's curvature to it. And of course, people will say, "Oh, it's just an illusion. God placed it up there," or maybe it's not God. Maybe it's some sort of science-based thing where they're just trying to trick us. And there's a glass wall up there somewhere, like a dome, and these lights shift through some sort of hologram, and it's all fake. I mean, I think that's a huge stretch, but to each their own, I guess.
What I don't understand is a lot of, not a lot, but I have heard of a lot of people saying, not that I want to stick on this topic, but that the Earth is flat, but everything else, all the other planets and everything are not. And I don't understand that.
I think it's their way of trying to make and this again, of course, goes to scripturally based things, because humanity is believed to be a very unique creation. And therefore, these people are believing that Earth too must be a very unique creation. We're separated from everything else around us, and that's where the difference lies. But again, they don't really have the evidence. They're just taking pieces of science that have been published and then either manipulating it or coming to their own conclusions based on what they're seeing. And yes, again, like Justin said, some of it's pretty convincing. But I think the few things that are convincing isn't enough to solicit a explanation that, yes, this is indeed the truth. The Earth is flat, and we're constantly moving upward at whatever rate of miles per hour or whatever. It's just, it doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it's not that I'm bashing people who believe in the flat Earth. I just don't understand it because I don't believe in that, and I just want to understand that point of view. I'm not closed-minded enough to believe that they're totally wrong and I'm totally right, or vice versa. I just want to understand their point of view and how they got to that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
So don't send me any hate mail thinking that I'm bashing you, or send mail because I don't get any.
And don't send any to us because in a couple of weeks we won't be reading it.
Send it all to Kat. No.
Oh yeah, there's been so many theories we've heard. Erik, this is going to be one of those times that I'll ask if we've done this. One of the theories that I don't believe we've ever covered, maybe we did, I cannot remember, is the moon being a space station of some kind. Have we ever talked about that?
I think we did, and it was back in like 2015, because I was in Virginia. That was back when we were doing the blue beam and all that, those topics.
Oh, okay, then maybe, yeah. So not specifically, we just included it in with something. Okay. But yeah, that's another one that was, nobody knows how old the moon is or whatever. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, okay. But we never specifically did an entire episode on that particular theory.
I thought you were going to ask Erik if you ever did an episode that the moon was made out of cheese. I don't know why that's where my mind automatically went.
That is the most common fact out there. That if we would just go up there and mine the cheese, we would not run out.
And those poor cows would no longer have to give so much milk.
Right.
We have little mice astronauts that go there and mine the cheese. Totally going off.
Why are you going to abuse mice to go do that? Just send the humans up there. We're overpopulating the Earth as it is.
Oh, yeah, that's true, too. Can you imagine little spacesuits, though, for those little mice? It'd be so adorable. Oh, Lordy. So what do you guys have in store now that ParaTruth Radio is quickly coming at a close? When's the last episode?
July 30th.
Okay. That's funny because that's when this episode's coming out.
Yeah. Well, Erik and I have discussed this for a while about co-writing a book together. But to go one step further, we wanted to do something that would benefit other writers. And it will be something that we are participating in as we're talking about subjects. So we wanted to help people better themselves as writers. And so we're doing a show called Right in the Pickle Barrel. And it's going to be an educational thing where we're talking about being a plotter, pantser, or planter. What is the best method for being published? Things along those lines. Editing, you name it. We'll be getting guests on, hopefully some guests from publishing companies and agents and editors and stuff like that to kind of give people the edge on getting themselves traditionally published. I personally like being self-published. Would I love to be traditionally published someday? Sure. But I think on my side of it, I want to educate people on being self-published or independently published versus traditionally published, because a lot of people treat indie publishing like it's the redheaded stepchild of the publishing community. Yeah. And it's not. That's one of those things that is a kind of a misnomer when it comes to self-publishing today. Back in the day, maybe it was not as good as being traditionally published, but
I like that idea. Kind of like the show that you had for a while, Erik. About hats. Oh my God, I forgot the title.
Oh yeah, All the Hats.
All the Hats, yeah.
Hats,
and
yeah.
I really enjoyed that show, because for somebody like me who doesn't understand anything about making TV shows and movies and all that, I just thought that was really interesting. So if you could quickly tell the listeners about what that show was about, since I mentioned it.
Yeah, for sure. No, All the Hats. I mean, it's very short-lived, unfortunately.
Yeah.
My buddy and I was living in Atlanta at the time. He moved. He didn't want to do like a long-distance podcast because he's an audio guy, an audio tech. So he's very particular about how audio sounds. And if we're in two separate rooms, it's a no-go. Just get rid of the podcast entirely. Yeah. So that's why it ended. But All the Hats was actually a weekly podcast that would discuss various roles within the film and TV world. So we would talk about everything from the lowest part of the totem pole, that's the production assistants, all the way up to the producers, everything in between, directors, cinematographers, writers. And we would just discuss those roles. We would have guests on who were regularly working in those roles to kind of explain what they do, what a daily looks like, for them. And then it was just like casual discussion between me and my co-host at the time, what we learned as independent filmmakers, for those who tend to wear all the hats, which is why it was strategically titled that way. That's a big thing in the film community is, what hat do you wear? And as an indie filmmaker, you pretty much wear all of them. So that was just our way of trying to educate younger filmmakers, people trying to learn their way up, or who maybe have worked in one department their whole life and wanted to learn about a different one. They can kind of tune in, see if it's a path they wanted to take, and go from there.
From someone like myself who has not worked in that line of business, I just found it really interesting to know everything that was going on behind the scenes, like I said, and it made me appreciate film and TV a lot more, because I know it's not easy work, but it made me appreciate what goes into making all this stuff for people's entertainment or education or whatever. There's a lot of work and there's a lot of people.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a ton. And, I think there's this misconception for people who don't understand it, but I've seen it through our podcasting career where, there's like the various award shows for cinematography for movies. Think of any award show, and people are I've always seen people say, like, why is there an award show for this? Why are they being credited for art, and stuff like that? It's like, it's simple, and it's not simple. Like, it's a process. It takes years to produce some of these things. And yeah, many of these film and TV shows, they're employing hundreds of people. And within that group, so say you have 100 people, it's split off into 25 in each department. And those departments rank from producers, hair and makeup, directors, cinematographers, gaffers, PAs, and everything in between. And people don't realize what actually goes into that. Not to mention the long hours. The longest that I've worked on a set was about 16 hours. On a set.
Wow.
Now, I know people who've worked longer than that, but that's just kind of the way it works. You get in early in the morning, 6 a.m. You may not leave until 10 p.m. It just depends on how the day goes, and it's exhausting. And it's part of why right now we're seeing, anyone who's listening might recognize there's a writer's strike happening right now. Yep. There's an actor's strike with SAG, and it's because a lot of these companies, these big wig producers, aren't paying enough money to these people. They're holding it for themselves. And these are millionaires and billionaires that are just stingy with money. They don't want to pay the actors who literally more or less run the show. Without the actors, you don't have a TV show or a movie. And same with the writers. Without a writer, you're not going to get content. So that's a big thing right now. Thankfully, I lately have been working in commercial stuff, so I don't have to worry about losing work. But I do know people. I have friends and acquaintances who have lost work over these last few weeks, and they're stuck at home. And it's just, it's just a crazy time right now. It's interesting.
I remember in the beginning too, when you started your show, All the Hats, and I would message you. I'm like, okay, what the hell's a PA, or what the hell is this? And then you're like, oh yeah, I should probably explain these because you just assume that people knew what it was. I'm like, no, I don't know what the hell this is. So
I remember that message, and I had to talk to my my co-host about it. I was like, so my friend, she's like, hey, I don't know what this is, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess that would make sense. We should always describe these things. But I guess like when you're supposed to be the expert and you're talking about it, it just comes naturally because we know what we're talking about. Yep. And there's been times where even Justin and I on, with ParaTruth Radio, we'll talk about something, get halfway through and be like, oh, we never really described what this was, Yeah. And so we go back, and even like when we talk about investigations and stuff recently, mind you, we've been doing this show for 9 years now, ParaTruth. And even, if we were to do a show on investigations tomorrow, we would still give descriptions of the various items and things that you would use, because there are always new people listening. Yep. That might be their first show, their first episode of their introduction to investigating. So they may not know what an EVP is, or a digital voice recorder in that case. They may not know what an EMF reader is. So I think it's always important to describe the various items, if you can describe them, to the audience, because you never know who's listening.
Yeah, well, when I first started my show, my dad used to listen, and his best friend, I would send both of them links when a show came out, and his best friend would message me saying, really good show, but what's an EMF detector? What's a spirit box? And I'm just like, oh, right, I guess you're not into the field, and you just don't think in the beginning that you should be describing this, but yeah, exactly. So so you will be starting a podcast together with that topic about the right? Yeah. Do you have a date when it's going to be released yet?
We're still working on that. We were pitching it to the network that we're with now. Originally, they said they were interested. Now we're not hearing anything. So depending on what happens within the next week will depend on when we release it. If we're shooting for October. If we go with the network, only because we want to do a seasonal podcast compared to how we've been doing it with ParaTruth Radio, which is pretty much every frickin' week. So it'll be a 10 episode, or maybe a little bit longer, just depends on what we're talking about. And then we'll take a small break. So it might be a little more break than quarterly, but October is our actual go-to. We might start it sooner if it doesn't work out with starting with the network. Okay.
And what's the title of the show again?
Go ahead, Erik.
Right in the Pickle Barrel. And that's WRTE in the Pickle Barrel.
Oh, that's cool.
So, yeah.
WRITE, you mean?
Yes. What did I say?
You said WRTE.
Oh yeah. Well, that's how I write.
I didn't even notice. Oh my God.
I tend to miss letters when I write as well. My full name, Erik Scerbak, is quite a few letters, and I probably have like 5 letters when I sign something. It's just, I think I do like when I sign, it's like ERKSCBK. So I'm missing like the E, the R's, the A's, like it's just whatever. But yeah, so it's WRITE in the pickle barrel, and it's something based off of baseball. It's a term used in baseball that's like for pitchers, I believe, to like get
the pickle
something in
barrel.
the pocket. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've never heard that term.
Yeah. So we were like, okay, I think this is a great. We spent, I don't know, like a week or so just kind of pitching ideas, but we sat down, had a brainstorming session after one of our episodes of PTR, and we just wrote out like, okay, well, here's a name, here's a name, and we came up with that one. We have this idea for a logo, which is currently being worked on, and I think it's gonna be fun. We wanted something catchy, something different, because I feel like there's so many shows out there that have very creative but similar names to other podcasts, and we just want to stand out.
Finding a name is difficult. I mean, I can't take credit for the name of my show. That was John Mallard. I mean, he was helping me out, and I was trying to come up with something different, and I'd mention something. He goes, no, that sounds too much like this show. And I'd say, how about this one? No, that sounds too much like that show. And then he's like, how about Paranormal Heart? I'm just like, oh, well, why did you think of that? And he goes, because you love the paranormal. It's coming from the heart. You want to talk to people. And I thought, okay. So I just ran with it. So, and I thanked him countless times. So yeah, finding a name is not easy.
Especially one that hasn't been taken before as well. Like almost all the ones we thought of, it had already been taken. Some of them hadn't produced episodes in years, but it's like, yeah, but do we want to be associated with that podcast if we decide to take that name?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do the research? You just kind of Google the name to see what pops up?
Yeah.
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 It's a lot easier to do that now than when you first started your ParaTruth Radio.
Yes. Yes.
Even more than when we started Night Stalkers.
Yeah. I can't. Yeah, and I don't remember what the process was with Night Stalkers or how we came up with it, because again, we were drunk when we came up with the name, so we kind of forgot.
I love that.
But at the time it stuck and it was fun, and we had like these. So we went to Scarefest. Is that Scarefest 9?
I'm not sure which number it was.
Okay, so there was the very first Scarefest we went to, though. It was like the last show that the Ghost Adventures gang did, which I still to this day I have Zach Bagan's autograph on the flyer for.
Oh, that's cool.
For Scarefest, yeah. Which I'm thankful for, because everyone, when you go to those shows, you have to pay to get an autograph.
Yeah.
And I ended up catching him walking through the hall.
That's right. I remember you telling me. Yeah.
And I was just like, hey, can I have an autograph? So he's like, wrote it off. Didn't have to pay a thing. Like, got that thing framed and sitting in the other room. But, we ended up meeting who we also got an autograph for, but I forget her name. She used to work with Ghost Hunters. I don't know if she did many episodes, but she did quite a few. And she ended up designing, or helped us design, business cards for Night Stalkers. And it was by far the best business cards we've ever had. They were beautifully made. They had this foil writing on them in red. It was a photo of me and Justin wearing all black, kind of arms crossed, your typical ghost hunter type of stance. Yeah. And we had this really cool graveyard scene in the background. And when you flipped it, you had this ghostly handprint on the back of it and all of our information. And they were waterproof or super water resistant. I still have a bunch of them in my car. Don't know why. You can't use them, but they're just pretty. But I look at those every once in a while. And
pretty.
Man, that was back when we first started, It's like a little memento.
Wasn't her name Kat as well? Kat or Catherine? She was a redhead. She was the redhead, and she was went over to International Ghost Hunters International. Right?
Yeah.
So are you going to be using the same person that did your latest logos, the guy that I used? Or are you going to be going someone else? Or do you want to say over the air?
Well, Erik did our logo for our current logo for ParaTruth Radio. we're asking a friend of ours that has a business here in Bismarck. It's a cookie business, but she's also a digital designer. And so I've reached out to her. I probably have to poke her again because I haven't received anything yet since the last time I poked her. So, but she did the logo for the Bizman Writers Guild.
Nice.
And she's done a couple of other logos, and she also was working on a kid's book with her cousin, I believe, or her friend. So, I mean, her work is very, very good.
I firmly believe in having, I am working on a website. Well, I'm not working on it. My cousin is. She went back to school and she does web designing. And I messaged her and I said, hey, I'd rather get you to do it because it's family rather than someone that I don't know and I hire some business or whatever to do a website who doesn't know me. And she's as goofy as I am. So, and all the family members think that her and I are actual sisters because we're so much alike and taste and mannerisms and everything is kind of weird, but I firmly believe in having family and friends do things like this, just because I find they get a better feel of what you're looking for.
Yeah, just for the record, you said based on our taste and mannerisms, and for a moment, as you said it, and based on our taste in men, and I was like, whoa,
that's funny. No mannerisms. Oh, geez.
That Canadian accent gets you every time, Erik.
It does, eh?
I remember Justin and I, we took a trip to Canada, up to Niagara Falls, and I think it was our first time in Niagara Falls together, and we got into the elevator of our hotel, and we're just like, we're going up. This guy gets in, and what does he say? Something like, "How's your day going, eh?" or something like that.
Yeah.
And we both just like froze, answered him. He got off, and we started busting up laughing. Like, I can't believe he said it.
And then going back and forth with the South Park. What was it? Guy and Buddy.
Yeah, Buddy. Yeah. Hey, buddy, what's up, eh? I remember telling you guys years ago that I don't say eh, not as much as you guys think. A lot of Canadians don't use it. And I was actually on your show once, and I don't remember if I was guest or host or what it was, but I actually said eh, and you're like, I thought you never said that. I'm like, crap. They called me out.
Now we just got to get a ticker for every time she says it. You said it like 1,500 times in the past year. Yeah, what's going on here?
Oh, that's too funny. So what else do you guys have other, not working together? What are you guys doing? Because Justin, I know you're doing 3D printing and things like that. That's pretty interesting. I love seeing that.
Yeah, and I want to kind of tie it in with my writing too. There are a couple of 3D model people that I have models from that I would love to pair with the books. Like I have one that is a baby dragon without wings that would be perfect for the worm. Mm-hmm. There have been a couple that have made griffins, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there is one of an Anubis bust from the one company that I signed up for their files as well, and that will be for the god. But I'm working on number 3 of the Legendary Creature Project. As I mentioned earlier, Erik and I are going to be working on a shared project together. So I'm hoping to start doing more writing than I have been in the past couple of years.
And don't forget, you said you're going to slide Bastet in that story somehow, because that's my favorite Egyptian.
I don't remember that.
Just saying that. Erik, what do you have going on?
I mean, not too much, but I do plan on starting a YouTube channel for my fitness stuff. So it's going to be a fitness channel on YouTube. So I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that. I'll tell you what, motivation is horrible lately, but hopefully something will come along with that. But also, and this is something I've been working on for, oh goodness, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months, but there was this other small paranormal podcast I was going to do on the side, just myself. Not anything like we've been doing. It's just strictly storytelling and informational, called Heartland Myths and Monsters. And so I've got 2 episodes recorded. And I was thinking of starting that up again and just putting it out there. And this is mainly just going to focus on the myths and monsters within the heartland of the USA. So all these various tales, things like that. And I talk about the actual subject matter, and then I go into various stories that people have told or shared throughout the internet regarding that particular entity or subject. So we'll see. I don't know. It's something that's in the books that I'm thinking of doing, but again, time is a thing, and motivation is even bigger thing. I don't have much of it.
I'm sitting here chuckling because when you said YouTube channel, I thought you said Voodoo channel at first.
Oh, yeah. I'm doing that too.
Your American accent, eh?
Yeah. Well, we can call it a Voodoo channel because it's, because it's a fitness channel. I'm going to woo all the ladies when I get on there.
Okay.
They can see me working out. So I'm going to do that little voodoo on them.
It's like whenever
Shelley still thinks you should do some dancing every time too, because she thought that would get everybody started watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should. So when I see you doing your workouts on Instagram, I'm like, he's just showing off. I just twisted an ankle watching him do that, Jeez. Well, thank you so much for being on, guys. I really, really appreciate this. Congratulations on so many years of podcasting. I know it's the end of ParaTruth, but I know we're going to be hearing you guys on other endeavors, and I'm looking forward to it. You guys have covered a lot, really, like over the years. Kudos to you and lots of research.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of research.
So before we sign off, why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yeah. So paratruth.com, and you can find all of our links for our socials on there. All of our episodes are on there. When we do transition, we're going to leave that up for a little bit, but we'll probably be taking the website down to save on cost. Mm-hmm. And then probably we'll be back on Spreaker primarily, and then it'll disseminate to all the other places that you find ParaTruth Radio for right in the pickle barrel. But yeah, any social medias, you can also contact us through paratruth.com. Instead of typing out the email name, there's just a contact button there for you. And you can also leave voicemails straight on the website as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any place you want to be found, Erik? Or just pretty much the same place?
Yeah, pretty much the same place. If you want to find me personally, you can put my whole name in the description, Erik Scerbak. Just Google me. I'm literally Googleable. So Googleable? Something like that. So it's pretty cool. If you just type my name and the internet, everything that I do will pop up. So
I remember I had you guys on one time, and there was a time you didn't want your last name known, Erik. You would just be known as Erik as a K, and I slipped and called you by your last name, and you're like, well, I guess I'm going with this now. So it's like, crap.
Yeah.
Well,
I think for a while there, I wanted to keep kind of the whole podcast life and my personal life separate.
Yeah.
But then eventually it's just like, it's an extension of who I am. So screw it at this point. Just whatever. And that's kind of the cool thing for Google. If you type that up, you'll find all my film stuff. You'll find my Instagram. You'll find ParaTruth stuff. And that'll, of course, link over to Justin as well. And my sister, who's an actor. So the three of us are interlinked through my name, which is kind of cool. You're welcome, Justin.
Like it or not.
Totally get it.
I'll claim him. It's fine.
It's just because my last name is rather unique and pretty rare. So it's pretty easy to find me that way, which is a nice thing.
Sadly, both of our last names. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I still want to call you Justin Cancilliere. I know it's Italian and not French, but
Cancilliere, get it right.
Cancilliere. I'll throw a French baguette at you.
And I'll dip it in some marinara sauce. There you go.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Good luck in all your future endeavors. I look forward to seeing what you guys have in store for in the future.
All right. Thanks for having us, Scott.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.
Paranormal Heart Podcast.